Hello, everyone, and welcome to Start Your Dungeons. I'm Bryce,
I'm Adam.
and today we're looking at Archon Studios' Masters of the Universe Battleground two-player starter set. So, Adam, let's talk about all the stuff that comes in this, because this is an interesting sort of skirmish hex-based game set in the Masters of the Universe world.
So you get a hex-based grid board with letters and numbers that tell you where all the terrain goes. You get some really heavy multiple level terrain with ladders. You get some shorter obstacles, but you get a lot of this. This isn't even all the terrain you get. There's still some
Yeah,
over in the
there's
box.
still bunches of it
Yeah.
in here.
So there is plenty of plastic in the box. You have five of the masters of the universe. You have the evil horde over here, and so beyond that, you get the character cards, which tell you the stats and special actions that those characters get. You have fate cards, which are your action economy. You get dice, tokens, item cards, which are upgrades,
And then the weapon
and then
cards.
weapon cards for each of your characters.
Yeah, so a lot in the box,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's pretty packed.
Yeah, it's a lot for all for the price of it, which we looked it up at the time of recording when you picked this up from Badger Studios. Only $110, so you're really getting a lot of value in plastic minimum, kind of with what you get in here. Let's talk about quality of the stuff. How we talked a little bit about these ones and how nice the terrain is. Again, heavy duty plastic that kind of has some weight to it, so it's not getting pushed around. But let's talk about the miniatures. How easy were the models, in terms of quality and assembly?
It was pretty easy to put them together. I didn't have any real problems with assembly. I didn't have any big problems with painting them. I wanted my models. You may notice if you can see them. I wanted mine to look more like the original action figures, so they look kind of flat, but they were fun to paint. I knocked them all out, and we were ready pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it didn't take long to get them all together.
Right. And then in terms of getting into it and how much you need to assemble to start playing, we did a starter scenario and we used, was it pretty much all the terrain, and then it was like three models from each side. So,
And it took us. I mean, we read through the rules, and some of the rules at first didn't make a lot of sense. I will be honest. I was a little confused by some of the rules. We played through it, and I think both of us, after we played through our first round,
right.
we there was a lot of kind of like, oh, wait a minute, I get what that was.
Right.
So it was, kind of after the fact, we made some mistakes, but ultimately it was pretty easy to get into.
Right. Very much easier than we thought it would be. Talking about building this stuff, was it basic? Did you need anything special for it? Just standard snips, standard, hobby knife to clean up, super glue.
I always have my files. I've said
Yeah.
that in earlier videos.
Speaking of, I finally bought files.
Yeah, they're great. I love files. But really, if you just have a hobby knife and some super glue, a little bit of paint, you're good to go. The terrain doesn't need much. It doesn't need to be glued. It doesn't need to be assembled. It's
Right.
it just pop it off the sprue and it's fine. The miniatures, there's some parts that you have to glue, and they weren't that bad. They came together. I would actually say that there's a lot of similarities between the way that these are constructed and the models that you might be used to from Games Workshop,
Okay.
but not the really difficult fiddly
Right.
bit kinds. There's just a couple of pieces, you sandwich them, and you're good to go.
Oh, that's awesome. That reminds me more of like Shatterpoint was, where it was like build a body, put the bits on the body kind of thing.
Yeah.
A little bit easier for that. Talk about cheat sheets for this. Are there any cheat sheets for the books? I don't think I remember us really having. I think it's
No.
like there's the rule book, and then there's like the scenario slash like tournament rule book in here.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about cards, because I think this is a big thing kind of to understand with this game. I think the cards are really, really cool. They have some really nice designs, but I think you can't just look at a card and know what the heck it is. Like, these items and weapons, like, it's like, oh, -1 to this. This game is weird where it's like -1 and +1s are actually better, or like -1 is worse for you.
Right.
Like, than normal. So it's like everything is pretty much rolling a 4 up to hit. And if it's like, oh, -1, you're like, oh, well, then I need maybe a 3 up. In a lot of other games and stuff, it's very different in how it kind of does things for that. And then a lot of the stuff is based on number of successes, which is interesting. It's not every hit I get does something. It's number of successes. And then the other thing too about the cards, I think, there are a lot of stats on these. Like, there's so much for each person that I think that the first time you look at it, it's a little bit difficult to kind of, like, I remember looking at the cards going like, I don't know what each one of these do kind of thing.
And that's one of the reasons why I say you're going to play your first game and you're going to get a lot of stuff wrong.
Yeah.
Play it a second time.
Right.
I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, I still think it was fun. Definitely once we played it, but I do think it was a little bit difficult to remember when certain things where it's like test against this,
Yeah.
It's not just a 2 hit, a 2 wound. It's a little bit different. It's about testing your stats against each other.
Yeah.
Talk about how getting into the game first. So there is a starter scenario. That's what we played. We enjoyed that. We had fun doing it. But I think something we'll talk about was the rule book. We struggled a little bit trying to find some information every now and then in the rule book.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing, one bit of constructive criticism. I think if they are to, if they update the rules and post them online, errata will be your friend with that book. I just think it's just it's a very new game. This is the first edition. I'm sure that there will be, further reprints of this that will have that errata, and probably will restructure the rule book so it's a little bit easier to use.
And it is a little bit different from a lot of other war games. I think that what makes it a little bit tougher than a lot of the other miniature games we play is there's a lot of stats and abilities and cards, and so it's trying to remember that all. In terms of memorizing keywords, that's another thing we always look at. There's not a lot of keywords in this, but there are a lot of symbols in this game.
So I mean, I'll take a picture of these and show them on the video. So everything's symbol based, and as long as you can refer back to the rule book for symbols, it's okay.
Right.
But keywords not so much of a big deal, but symbols, there's tons of them.
Yeah, I think that's something that you'll learn that easier too as you play. The game itself, once we started, like we said, it wasn't difficult, but it was really kind of a fun sort of different take on a different other game, because the thing that this game kind of makes this different, and kind of talking about where it stands out in terms of how we like this game, like what we like about the system, the fate cards are a really cool way to play this game. So every round you have fate cards in your hand, and I think, is it equal to the number of characters you have in play +1?
I think so.
So, yeah.
Maybe wrong about that.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah. It's been a little bit since we played this one. But the way it works is basically you flip over a card and it determines your initiative. And then when you use that initiative card, whoever gets to go first, you play a card and it generates you action points of magic. And then you can activate characters that you want to activate. But what's really cool is you can multiple activate people. But the way they balance that in this game is every time you choose to do something, it costs an additional action point every time. So if you move once, it costs an action point. If you want to move again, it costs 2 action points. So you can do things like, I'm going to spend all of my cards to have Skeletor, which is how I actually won our starter game, was having Skeletor blast your enemies like multiple times. And I rolled really well. It ended up doing it. But like, I spent all my resources in it into where if I didn't do it, I was just dead.
Yeah.
And
I didn't do a great job of taking advantage of cover.
Right.
And he took advantage of that with Skeletor blasting me and taking that risk.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a fun close game.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I really like about this system is that the cards are a little bit different. It's not just every model gets to make like 2 or 3 actions per turn. It's you get to choose. So if you want to put a bunch of effort into, He-Man charging in and attacking, that's fine. But if you're also like, I just kind of want to do 1 or 2 actions with Merman, you can just do that,
Yeah.
And I do think the other thing that I really like about this game is I actually really like the abilities on the cards are
Yeah.
really cool. And like how you generate magic for your characters and then use their abilities and stuff. It feels Master of the Universe, but
Yeah.
in another way I would say is it feels like you're fighting with action figures.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh, and also I want to make mention of the item cards. You get stuff like the battle armor. If you
yeah.
were a kid in the 80s and you had the battle damage He-Man and the Skeletor, that's in the item
Yeah. It's a
cards.
lot of shout outs to things
Yeah,
throughout the
there's
universe.
so much that was in the show, like these jetpacks, like Stratos. There's just so much from the show that when you see it, or also in the comic books,
Yeah.
like in the old comic book releases that they did, and you'll see those callbacks, and
It's a game for fans.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit now about the what comes in the box in terms of missions. Now I know there's a starter mission. I believe there's also 12 other regular missions that you can set up and play with.
Yeah, it has. So the really great thing about it is it gives you all the terrain that you need for it, and it shows you exactly where to put the terrain for
Right.
each of those scenarios. So it's pretty easy to go through all of those scenarios in that book.
Right. We did, like I said, we did the starter one and I felt like it was really good, but I felt like it left me hungry to see more of this system, which is a good thing, for a game. And in terms of how long it took us to play, it was our first game. We went back and forth, but I would say it only took us like hour 30 max. And I think
Yeah.
once you get good at it, you could probably do it in an hour.
And that was with us looking back at the rule book
Right.
lots of times. So I mean, you could probably get it, 3 or 4 scenarios done in a night if you
Yeah.
know what you're doing and you want an evening's entertainment.
Right.
You're going through, maybe 3 or 4 scenarios, 2-3 hours.
Yeah. And what's really cool I like about it is that the scenarios feel a little bit different. They're not all kill missions. Some
Yeah.
of them are more objective based. And I really like that kind of style for it. So talking about is the box a complete game? It's a full on. Like
Yeah.
it has everything. The thing that's weird about it is because we always talk about playing an event. There are tournament rules in the back, and we sat down and we looked at them. And I don't think you can do tournament play with just 5 models.
Right.
You have to, like, you can buy, so every character card has a cost on it, and then also tells you the amount of upgrades and what kind of upgrades it can take. And the thing about it is you end up spending a lot of time, like, building things out. I think you would actually have to buy an expansion or two for each side of the, like, good or evil side of the force to be able to kind of play a full, like,
Yeah.
tournament game.
I'm not really sure that this is tournament ready. I mean, we may be wrong about
Right.
that. They may have like an updated points list or something that can run, just one of these war bands, but it seems like you probably do need one of the expansions, which there are several at this point.
Yeah.
There's like they've done like Beastman.
Yeah.
There's a She-Ra that's coming.
Yeah, there's some really cool ones that are done with the characters like He-Man with Battle Cat.
Yeah.
And so like there's some really cool designs that they've kind of done and
The
added to it.
Sorceress.
Yeah.
And there's also new terrain in those boxes. So you buy an expansion pack and it's got like 2 figures and a terrain piece.
Right, which is really cool to see. But yeah, I do think this is a weird one. I don't know enough about tournaments. It's not a game that's played very much locally
Right.
with us. We're pretty much the only two who kind of play this one. But it's a really cool little one, and I kind of hope it gets a little bit more love. I think one of the other big problems with it, Archon Studios didn't originally have it in the US. It was originally only to the Europe.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it's got a better scene over there. We might be wrong on that. But it is a really cool, kind of fun game. So we already talked about that. So like for expansions, is that pretty much it? Just the Warband box? I feel like it's really just right now their little like starter expansions for it are the models and a few extra pieces of terrain.
But I feel like for a game like this, because you get so much in the starter, that's all you need for expansions.
And I like that you can kind of pick and choose. If you're like, hey, I really like playing evil and I just want a few options for evil, pick up only the evil boxes. If you really like playing the good guys, jump in on that. And, there's no saying you can't play the way that the game is kind of built to play. The tournament play turns everything kind of into a points-based game, but really you could just pick, hey, let's just each take 4 of these 5 models and go. And I think that's a really cool kind of way to play this, where you kind of pick and choose and then maybe do a few upgrades or whatnot, but it does a good job of like being good as I think a casual sort of skirmish game, and also it does look like it can ramp to a tournament like competitive game. So who is this box set for? Talk about it. Value. You think this is a good one for someone who's never played a miniature game to step into a miniature?
I'm not sure about that.
So one of the things I really like about it for a new player is I always enjoy games where you don't have to buy a ton of like measuring tools and things. Everything's grid based, which is really nice. There is a way to play the game actually with a range ruler that comes in the game, but it just makes sense to do it on this, I think, on the grid system. I think it is a little bit complex in terms of all the stats and things, so it might be a little bit harder, but I do think it's actually like it's simple enough once you get it that I think it's like a good one. If you can get it down, it might be good.
I think so. My overall opinion of who the game is for, one, if you were a fan of He-Man when you were a child, if you've got that nostalgia, this box is good. I mean, not only for the game, but those miniatures.
Yeah.
Painting those miniatures, you're going to have so much fun looking at some of those details, even things like He-Man's shield, and you're like, oh my gosh, I remember, like pulling that out of the packaging when I was a kid, and all that is there. Orko is there. You've got this a great set of 10 miniatures to pull out and paint. There's so much in this box just to have as a collector. But what I would say is, if you are new to wargaming, watch a lot of YouTube videos on the instructions. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but we have a lot of experience in the tabletop games, and even we were a little bit confused at first.
Yeah, and I think it's just, again, it's very different from anything else, so it might actually help that if you're a new player, because
That's true.
You don't have a reference to anything else.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of a good thing.
And maybe we had that, cognitive interference going on.
Yeah, or a lot of times, too, with some of these rule sets, they're simple enough to where I overthink it, and I'm like, oh, it has to be more than that. It's like, no, it's just that, dude. Like, that's it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's actually really easy.
Yep.
But listen, so always our final question. Would you keep playing based on this box?
Yeah, I'm planning to buy more. I want to. I definitely want to go back and play more. I want to buy some expansions. We have so many games that we play that it's hard fitting in more miniatures games into the rotation. But
this one I like.
Yeah, this one, especially because we have a small model count, it's not too hard to not only expand but to continue to play.
Right. And I think too what's nice is, like we said, we've gotten to a point to where we know the rules, so it'll be a little bit easier. And I just like, it's fun. Like, it does feel like a really fun, like, tactical kind of game with you spending your resources to determine, like, hey, like, I'm just going to move with this guy. And you're like, okay. And then you go, all right, now I'm going to move with this guy twice. And then I'm going to blast you 3 times. And then it's like, holy cow, like, what am I going to do? Yeah. And, like, I just really, really enjoy that aspect of it. And I think that It feels a little bit different from a lot of other miniature games where it's usually like a model goes and it doesn't get to go again.
Yeah.
In most cases, so it is kind of fun to kind of have that little thing. But yeah,
And
I
that,
would like to keep playing this.
and that also, that point, it brings up a lot of tactical stuff because you're not just playing the pieces, and your opponent's pieces. You're trying to anticipate if your opponent is going to take that risk and use that one model again, and really push it.
Yeah.
Which
that came up in our game because
Yeah.
I think you put a He-Man out early, and that he got shot off the board quick, and you
Yeah.
were like, I didn't even realize like you would have had so many actions to do this
Yeah.
with, and it's like, yeah, I could target focus. I think like just personally, if you're looking to pick this up, Trapjaw is one of my favorite characters like
Yeah.
in this box because you have the grappling hook that lets you super quick, but you can switch between the hook attachment and his laser attachment, and like it's a really cool little design that they have. But it does add a bit of tacticalness that maybe like the first time you play it, like you said, you're like, oh man, I forget that coming from other skirmish games, this is a one-time thing. Yeah, I activate, I'm done. It's like, no, you could keep going,
you keep
pushing. Yeah, but that's our review for the Master of the Universe Battlegrounds. 2-player starter set. Again, I think it's a thumbs up from both of us. It's a really good one if you're a fan of the He-Man universe, or you're looking for maybe a skirmish game that's got a little bit more card play than
Yeah.
normal, a little bit more kind of tacticalness to it. This is a great one to pick up. But let us know in the comments if you are interested in picking this up or you have played the Battleground starter set. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Y'all take care.
Bye.